youngest brother to the water area. When they reached the attraction, Davi told his father he needed to use the bathroom. Since it wasn't his first time there, Miranda allowed him to go alone while he stayed with his younger son. But minutes passed, and Davi did not return. First, his father waited, but soon he began to panic, so he decided to search the area. Unbeknownst to Miranda, Davi had changed direction. On his way to the restroom, he passed the volcano slide and decided to climb it instead. What he didn't know was that the ride had been closed for maintenance. Critical pipes had been removed and parts of the structure were dismantled. Davi only realized something was wrong after he had already gone in. He fell nearly 45 feet, striking a metal support structure before landing below. By the time Miranda found him, a crowd had gathered. An ambulance siren echoed through the park as his son lay motionless on the ground. Despite desperate efforts from medical staff, Davi later died at the hospital. After the incident, park officials claimed the ride had been completely closed and clearly marked with warning signs, but Davi's parents disagreed. They said the slide was only partially blocked with boards and tape and was still accessible. Investigators later confirmed the parents' account to be true. In the end, the park manager and the engineer responsible were arrested and charged with manslaughter by negligence. The Verrückt disaster. The Verrückt water slide was once the most talked about attraction at Schlitterbahn, Kansas City. Verrückt means insane in German, and that was exactly the promise. When it opened in 2014, it was billed as the world's tallest water slide, standing at roughly 168 feet. But behind the record-breaking height were serious warning signs. On Verrückt, riders sat in a large inflatable raft secured with seat belts. They were sent down a near vertical first drop, launched up a massive second hill, and then rushed toward the splash pool below. It looked thrilling, but early testing showed it was a disaster waiting to happen. The ride's opening had already been delayed due to multiple problems. During test runs, rafts reportedly lifted off the track and went airborne. Even after redesigns and additional tests, co-owner Jeff Henry admitted the ride was still dangerous, though he insisted it was safe. What is that even supposed to mean? At the time, Kansas law did not require state inspections for all amusement rides. Parks could self-inspect, so Verrückt opened to the public. On August 7, 2016, Caleb Schwab, son of Kansas State Representative Scott Schwab, boarded the slide. Along with two adult women, he was strapped in a three-person raft. During the descent, the raft suddenly went airborne. Caleb was ejected from his seat. He struck a metal support pole connected to the slide's netting system and died instantly. The two women in the raft survived but suffered facial injuries. The park was immediately closed and an investigation began. Authorities later found that Caleb, who weighed around 74 pounds, had been seated in the front of the raft instead of between the two heavier riders. This created an uneven weight distribution, which investigators believe contributed to the raft lifting off the ground. They also determined that the slide's metal support structure and netting system posed serious hazards at high speeds. At least 13 prior injuries had been reported on Verrückt, including riders striking the netting or structural components. Following the tragedy, Scott Schwab advocated for changes to Kansas amusement ride laws. The state strengthened oversight requirements, ending the system that allowed parks to self-inspect without consistent state review. In 2018, Jeff Henry, operations director Tyler Austin Miles, and co-owner John Shuley were arrested and charged with crimes including second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. However, in 2019, the criminal charges were dropped. Verrückt was dismantled in late 2018. The rest of Schlitterbahn, Kansas City never recovered from the incident. The park was permanently closed, and the site was demolished in 2021. Most of these accidents happen in real time, but what happens when danger hides behind a camera lens? On features cases.
ChatGPT is great for quick answers, but when you need writing expertise, Grammarly is my go-to tool.
Cases 2 and 10. "28 footages, 7 levels. I've combed through hours of footage and compiled the most disturbing ones into this iceberg. Each video shows the exact time something snapped. We'll start with the mildly unsettling, but as we go deeper, the footage becomes far more disturbing than you'd expect. So let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Stranger approaches teen. The Bryants were at home when their son stepped outside to walk the dog, something he did every day. Only this time, someone was waiting for him. As soon as he walked out holding the dog's leash, a silver BMW pulled up. A stranger stepped out of the car and began approaching him. Despite being repeatedly taught about stranger danger, the boy froze. He couldn't move as the man closed the distance. Inside the house, his father noticed something was wrong and immediately headed toward the door. Before the stranger could get any closer, the father intervened.
What you got to ask my son?
I was wondering about the airplane noise.
The man gave an explanation that didn't fully make sense. However, because the family's neighborhood sits near an airport and the excuse seemed improvised, the father chose not to press the issue further. The stranger then left the area. The boy was unharmed, but the encounter raised serious concerns about how quickly an ordinary moment could have ended very differently. Stolen ambulance. When 18-year-old Armando Vinaga was pulled from a ditch after reports of erratic driving, authorities believed the danger had passed. What they didn't know was that only hours later, Armando would do something even more dangerous right under their watch. While being treated at the hospital, Armando managed to steal an ambulance and drive off heading south. The theft immediately triggered a police pursuit. Dashcam footage from the chase shows Armando hanging out of the ambulance while driving with only one hand on the wheel. Each time officers tried to box him in, he swerved through another intersection to escape. But there was only so far he could go. Armando eventually struck a curb, causing the ambulance's engine to shut down. Officers rushed out of their vehicles, shouting commands and ordering him to stay put. The boy was finally arrested without further incident. However, as the footage shows, he disturbingly appeared more excited than concerned about what had just happened. Armando was later charged with reckless driving while intoxicated, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and evading arrest. Jason Harley Klopfer. 41-year-old Jason Harley Klopfer was asleep at home with his wife when loudspeakers suddenly ordered him to step outside. Disoriented, the couple raised their hands in compliance. 20 seconds later, Jason was shot multiple times. What Jason didn't know was that while they slept, a neighbor had contacted the police. The caller claimed there had been shouting, screaming, and possible gunshots coming from Jason's residence. According to the report, the neighbor said Jason's wife could be heard screaming for him to stop, followed by what sounded like gunfire before everything went silent. A few minutes later, a county deputy arrived at the home. Despite finding no immediate signs of an active threat, the deputy requested backup and later summoned the SWAT team. When SWAT arrived, officers deployed a robotic device equipped with lights and cameras to search the trailer. Surveillance footage from inside the home shows the robot moving down the hallway and shining its light directly into the bedroom. The sudden light woke Jason and his wife up. Moments later, Jason picked up the robot in one hand while holding a cigarette in the other. He stepped forward with his hands raised, with his wife standing behind him, also with her hands in the air. There was no visible weapon. Jason collapsed on the floor, screaming in pain as his wife panicked and screamed for help. Still, officers shouted for the terrified couple to get out with their hands up.
I'm shot! What the hell? I'm shot!
He's shot! What the hell did you do?
I'm dead! I'm shot! I'm shot!
You shot him! He's shot!
Even after officers realized he was on the ground, they stepped over him and went in to inspect the home. Jason was eventually rushed to the hospital and he survived, but that was not the end of the story. Before noon the next day, the county sheriff's office issued a statement claiming Jason had engaged in a verbal altercation with officers, emerged from a camper trailer, and confronted law enforcement. The statement also said he was charged with communicating threats, resisting, obstructing, and delaying officers with the possibility of additional charges. As one can imagine, those claims didn't last long. Jason later released surveillance footage from inside his home, directly contradicting the official accounts. In the months that followed, he filed a civil lawsuit over the shooting. While no officers were criminally charged, of course, the case ultimately ended in a $10 million settlement. Level 2. Lars Mittank. This man was supposed to meet his friends the next day. But the moment he entered that airport, he did something that no one has ever fully been able to explain. On June 30th, 2014, Lars Mittank traveled to Varna, Bulgaria with 5 friends for a vacation. It was his first time leaving Germany, so the group was excited. For the next week, they stayed at a seaside resort just outside the city. At first, everything went according to plan. They swam in the pool, played football, and went clubbing at night. The only concern was that Lars wasn't eating well. Still, nothing seemed seriously wrong until the final hours of the trip. The day before the group was set to return home, Lars got into an argument with another group of German tourists while watching a football match at a bar. After the confrontation, Lars stormed out and didn't return for the rest of the night. When he finally came back the next morning, Lars told his friends he had been violently attacked by 4 men, allegedly hired by the group he had argued with. A medical exam later confirmed that Lars had an injured jaw and a ruptured eardrum. Doctors prescribed him an antibiotic called Cefprozil and advised him not to fly due to the injury to his ear. This meant Lars could not return home with the others. His friends suggested staying behind with him, but Lars refused. He insisted he would be fine on his own and encouraged them to stick to their original plan. He further assured them that he would return home the next day instead. The next morning, Lars packed his bags and prepared to leave, but something about him had changed. After checking into a hotel closer to the airport, his behavior became noticeably strange. He began acting paranoid. At one point, Lars even called his mother, pleading that people were trying to kill or rob him, so she needed to cancel his credit cards. Later that night, hotel security cameras captured Lars pacing up and down the hallways. He repeatedly left the building and returned, appearing more restless and anxious every time. The following morning, Lars arrived at the airport and saw the doctor. Despite getting a green signal to fly, Lars refused to leave the doctor's office. He repeatedly expressed fear and confusion about the medication he had been prescribed. Minutes later, the situation escalated. Lars began shouting that he didn't want to die and that he needed to get out of the airport. So he abandoned all of his luggage and ran from the terminal. Security cameras captured him sprinting outside, jogging away from the airport, climbing over a fence, crossing a meadow, and disappearing into a nearby forest. That was the last time Lars Mittank was ever seen. More than a decade passed, and his disappearance remains unexplained. Some doctors have suggested his behavior may have been caused by side effects from the medication he was prescribed. However, investigators later confirmed that Lars hadn't even taken those meds. To this day, neither his family nor experts have reached a clear conclusion about what caused Lars' sudden paranoia or why he ran into the forest and vanished without a trace.
Most people don't know that you can get a domain from Squarespace. Not just a website. But you're not most people.
Sabeh al-Alkawi. On February 22nd, officers responded to a domestic disturbance call and rushed to the scene. But instead of saving a life, the response ended one. Officer Justin Brines was dispatched along with 2 other officers. Each patrol car left within seconds of the others, sirens blaring and emergency lights activated. As they sped through the city, drivers instinctively pulled over to make way. The officers were moving so fast that 2 of the patrol cars cleared an intersection before the traffic light even turned green. Officer Brines, driving alone, reached speeds of nearly 90 miles per hour on a road with a posted limit of 30. He was approaching one of the city's busiest intersections. At the same time, 30-year-old Sabeh al-Alkawi was driving home after his last pizza delivery. He had no idea about what was coming for him. As Sabeh approached the intersection, he had a green light and entered normally. Officer Brines, on the other hand, reached the same intersection against a steady red light. Unfortunately, his view of Sabeh's car was blocked by a 3-story building to the right. Sabeh, on the other hand, couldn't see the squad car because his view was also blocked by the same building. When Officer Brines finally saw Sabeh's car, he slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The patrol car struck Sabeh's vehicle on the driver's side, pushing it more than 200 feet past the point of impact. Sabeh al-Alkawi was rushed to the hospital with critical injuries, but hours later, he was pronounced dead. He left behind a wife and twin boys. Under New York law, police officers responding to emergency calls are permitted to exceed speed limits, so after reviewing the case, the Attorney General concluded that Officer Brines would not be criminally charged. Still, his driver's license was revoked and he was fired from the police department. In the end, the al-Alkawi family filed a civil lawsuit against the city of Troy. The city later agreed to pay approximately $5.8 million to Sabeh's widow and children. Horrific crash. On September 24, 2024, 25-year-old entrepreneur Molodoi was driving his Audi RS5 when everything went terribly wrong. It was late in the evening and the roads were mostly empty. Molodoi pressed the accelerator, reaching speeds of around 270 kilometers per hour, nearly twice the maximum speed limit. His dashcam recorded a truck ahead of him slowly changing lanes to the left. Molodoi had almost no time to react. Seconds later, his sports car slammed into the truck and became lodged underneath it. The impact ripped the roof off the Audi, leaving Molodoi trapped inside. When rescuers arrived, it took considerable effort to free him. By the time they managed, it was too late. Molodoi did not survive. The investigation revealed more troubling details. The vehicle had no license plates, and the one found in the trunk suggested Molodoi had a history of reckless driving. Before this crash, he had accumulated over 100 fines, totaling nearly 100,000 rubles. This was not his first act of dangerous driving, but it was his last. Level 3. Sydney Thomas. March 1st, 2024 was a normal workday for Sydney Thomas, a semi-truck driver for the food service company Sysco. Like any other delivery, her truck was loaded and she hit the road. But she never made it to her destination. While driving across the Clark Memorial Bridge near Louisville, a pickup truck suddenly swerved out of its lane to avoid a stalled vehicle. In doing so, it slammed directly into Sydney's semi. The impact damaged the truck's suspension, and from that moment on, the semi could no longer respond properly to steering. No matter which way Sydney turned the wheel, the truck kept moving forward. Before she could fully process what had happened, the semi crashed through the bridge railing. The front of the truck came to rest dangling nearly 100 feet above the Ohio River, with Sydney trapped inside the cab. Bystanders began recording on their phones. Many of them, including Sydney herself, believed they were witnessing her final moments. The truck was balanced in a position where even a small movement could send it plunging into the river. Making matters worse, Sydney didn't know how to swim. Falling into the river would almost certainly have been fatal. For the next 40 minutes, Sydney remained perfectly still, praying for another chance. Our casual conversation, seemingly unbothered by his arrest.
You got a favorite hymn?
What's that?
You got a favorite hymn?
No, I don't.
Why not?
I don't know. I've never been into them.
Sophie Brown, however, reacted quite differently. She appeared visibly anxious and overwhelmed by what was happening. That concern came too late. Sophie later pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and she was sentenced to 5 years and 3 months in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Jack Morgan, the mastermind behind the plot, was found guilty of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and was sentenced to life in prison. Level 5. Miami Zombie Attack. While researching for this vehicle, this is one of the cases that I found extremely disturbing. Zombie movies feel purely fictional. I believe the same. But this incident kind of proved otherwise. On the morning of May 26, 2012, 31-year-old Rudy Eugene drove to Miami Beach, Florida for the Urban Beach Week Hip Hop Festival. His trip started normally until his car broke down on the causeway connecting downtown Miami to South Beach. For the next 40 minutes, security cameras captured Rudy moving around the car, appearing unsure what to do. Around noon, he abandoned the vehicle, but not to seek help or continue his journey. Instead, he began an utterly shocking act. Rudy started crossing the 3-mile causeway, stripping off his clothes as he walked. He discarded his shoes, driver's license, and even his Bible, eventually becoming completely naked. Once he reached the other side, he encountered 65-year-old Ronald Popo, a homeless man lying under an elevated people mover. Without warning, Rudy attacked. He struck and bit Popo's face, stripping him of his pants and causing severe injuries that left the man blind in both eyes. A passing cyclist witnessed the attack and immediately called 911. When police arrived, Rudy ignored their commands. He growled at the officers and resumed attacking Popo. With no other options, an officer fired at Rudy. The first shot was ineffective. It took 3 more shots for the 18-minute attack to stop. Rudy Eugene died at the scene. Thanks to public support, Ronald Popo underwent months of facial reconstruction surgery. And despite the medical efforts, he remains permanently disfigured and blind. Investigators later discovered that Rudy had been arrested 8 times since age 16. Initially, authorities believed Rudy and Popo were strangers, but they had previously met while working with Miami's homeless community. Some speculated that the use of a street drug like bath salts may have influenced Rudy's behavior. However, toxicology reports detected only marijuana in his system. To this day, the motive behind the attack remains unknown. Barbara Gustern. Barbara Gustern was an American vocal coach and singer known for teaching many notable students, including Blondie's lead vocalist, Debbie Harry. She dedicated decades to supporting and guiding her students, but it only took one unfortunate incident to change everything. On March 10, 2022, 87-year-old Barbara left her apartment to attend a student's performance after finishing a rehearsal.
Munch, crunch, crunch, munch, munch.
I eat little baby's ice cream. It keeps me young. It keeps me light on my feet.
Let's start with the strange and slowly make our way to the most disturbing pieces of media on the internet. I made this iceberg myself, and trust me, this gets terrifying fast. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Happy Tree Friends. One of the most well-known entries on this iceberg, Happy Tree Friends is an adult animated web series created by Aubrey Ankrum, Rode Montijo, and Ken Navarro. While I described it as well-known, infamous might be a better word for it, as Happy Tree Friends was created to be deceptively cutesy, almost obnoxious, before shocking its viewers with some of the worst, or best, animated gore you'll ever see. Yeah, Happy Tree Friends relies solely on its subversive shock value. Every episode follows the same formula of starting peacefully, pretending to be an edutainment cartoon, with their characters living their own lives, and ending with most or all of them dead. What leads to the violence and death on screen is usually something very minor. One of the characters trips and cracks its skull on a rock, or another one of them goes crazy and kills everybody. In true serialized cartoon fashion, there isn't much of a story that isn't introduced and resolved in the same episode. Once you get used to it, watching the show either becomes fun or you start dreading it a little. Some people can't turn away from all the gore, while others really enjoy it. And that's the genius of Happy Tree Friends. The web series aired its first episode on December 24th, 1999 on the Mondo Media website. The first 2 seasons were web series, with the 3rd season premiering on Comic-Con 2006 as a whole television show. Happy Tree Friends lasted until 2017, airing a 5th season called Still Alive. The show's popularity waned over the years as people's humor changed to something more modern, but it was never truly forgotten. How could it be? The Kid and the Camera. The Kid and the Camera is a successful short horror film created by YouTuber Grumbled Inc. Entertainment. It was uploaded on January 15, 2023 and has since amassed 3.5 million views. The Kid and the Camera is also one of only 3 videos on Grumbled Inc. Entertainment, which is unfortunate as the creator seems highly talented. The Kid and the Camera tells the story of a boy named Kalen and the fairy-like creature known as Kipsneed. On his 6th birthday, Kalen received a photo camera and developed a love for photography. He took pictures of everything that caught his eye until one day his camera broke. Kalen was crushed and couldn't sleep, but that same night he was visited by the Kipsneed. Kalen is immediately skeptical of the creature. Kipsneed is able to silence his doubts by claiming that it was no stranger since it knew Kalen's name.
I even knew your name, Kayla.
Kipsneed claims to know a place where Kalen's camera can be fixed, and all he needs to do is no stranger since it knew Kalen's name.
I even knew your name, Kayla.
Kipsneed claims to know a place where Kalen's camera can be fixed, and all he needs to do is follow the Kipsneed into the woods. Kalen agrees and follows the fairy deep into the forest. I won't spoil the ending since you can easily find and watch the original 7-minute short film for free on YouTube, but it's a very good watch, surprisingly well made and thought out as it builds tension with its quiet atmosphere. The short has a stop-motion animation and video quality style reminiscent of 90s children's shows. That adds another layer of horror, as any teenager or adult could see through Kipsneed's obviously creepy demeanor, but a child could be fooled by something or someone like him and end up as Kalen did. Level 2. Cursed Teletubbies Hospital Photo. You might have seen this photo before, a kid in a hospital bed surrounded by 4 of the creepiest Teletubbies you've ever seen. The Cursed Teletubbies photo is an internet classic that has been around for almost a decade now. Many people have tried to investigate further into it, but the trail always begins and ends in the same place. The image was first posted by user JF1984 in the r/creepy subreddit. The post has since been deleted. Speaking with JF1984 yields little more information. All we know is that he took a photo of it in the hallway of a British hospital. The photo was in a children's ward on a board titled Celebrities, Who's Visited Us. Trying to research elements in the picture also yields little to no results. We can extract from the image that the people sent to cheer this poor kid were probably using bootleg costumes. On the other hand, it's not like it's hard to make the Teletubbies appear creepy. The internet has taken notice of that, as this image in particular has been edited multiple times to appear scarier, not to mention how many Teletubbies-themed creepypastas you can find. The photo remains a mystery, as it should. Another unexplained thing added to the pile of weird, unsettling things you can find online.
Grainger offers over 1 million high-quality products, from motors and belts to switches and sensors, helping maintenance engineers keep production lines moving. Call, click, or stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Sitting and Smiling. Sitting and Smiling is one of the most interesting video series you'll find on YouTube. Every Sitting and Smiling video is nothing more than 4 hours of endurance artist Benjamin Bennett sitting and smiling. Really, Benjamin has created and uploaded exactly 327 of these videos, 1,308 hours of non-stop smiling while staring right into the camera without saying a word. It is safe to say that many people find these videos unsettling. There have been a few awkward moments, like when someone walked on Benjamin doing his little routine, but nothing was creepy about it. As stated before, these videos are a form of endurance art. Endurance art is a performance art involving some form of hardship, such as pain, solitude, or exhaustion. You can see this in a few raw moments during his videos when he breaks into tears but remains smiling or urinates himself. It's kind of hard to watch, but it shows Benjamin's commitment. On the other hand, what Benjamin is doing is a form of meditation, and apparently, after an hour or more of doing it, you should be able to just drift off and lose track of time. Now, that is if meditation works on you to begin with. In his videos, Benjamin Bennett has since transitioned to walking and talking in a new series he calls Walking and Talking. Hopefully you are interested in checking out what Benjamin is really like. Dead by a bouncer at a bar in San Mateo, Rizal. The bouncer stated that he killed John using his service weapon when he went off-key while singing My Way and struggled to get back on track. And yes, the story makes no sense, like many of the explanations given to the case. Experts have attempted to explain what happened by correlating the song's lyrics to a heightened state of aggression. Karaoke is very popular in the Philippines, as it is in many Asian countries, and the country does have a rather high murder rate. So, while not as exciting, it's likely a coincidence that the song played during those crimes and was not the reason they were committed. Junji Ito's work. Modern horror is not often considered a work of genius, with movies and games often relying on cheap tricks like jump scares and CGI gore to try to shock the audience. Enter Junji Ito, a 61-year-old Japanese manga artist known for his outstanding talent when it comes to telling mind-bending horror stories and drawing some of the most grotesque things you'll see with incredible artistry. Though you likely know him. His works, such as Tomie, Uzumaki, and Gyo, are universally recognized as masterpieces. Junji Ito was born on July 31, 1963 in Sakushita, Japan. He began his experience in the horror world at a very young age, with his first manga being Mummy Teacher by Kazuo Umetsu. He began drawing manga at the age of 4, taking inspiration from the works he read in magazines. He continued to draw as a hobby until he became a dental technician in 1984. In 1987, he submitted a short story to Monthly Halloween that won an honorable mention in the Katsuo Umetsu Prize. This story ran for 13 years and was later serialized as Tomie. From there, his manga career took off. Besides Gyo, Tomie, and Uzumaki, you might also know Junji Ito from his slightly less famous but equally good works such as The Enigma of Amigara Fault, Hellstar Remina, and The Thing That Drifted Ashore. However, those are just a few more of his many works, as Junji Ito is a prolific writer. His works blend cosmic horror with thought-provoking stories that I just can't recommend enough. PlayStation 3 Creepy Baby. If you grew up around the early 2000s, you might have seen and perhaps only partially remember this commercial. The 29-second commercial features a baby doll laughing, whispering in the tongue of demons, and crying as it stares at the brand new PS3. Creepy sci-fi sounds play in the background as we're subjected to this surreal experience. The commercial ends where, even if there are problems with the story, there is or has been a Catman of Greenock, one way or another. Possessed Girl Found on Subway. Possessed Girl Found on Subway begins with two friends casually exploring a subway tunnel, apparently on their way back home. They talk very openly and seem unafraid, that is, until they find a girl convulsing and screaming on the ground. She rolls around, bleeds, and even begins stabbing herself with a sharp object as the two friends debate what to do. They wisely decide to leave, but it's too late and the girl charges them. The whole video is visceral and disturbing, the likes of which you wouldn't find on YouTube unless it was buried in the depths of the platform. Ironically, that is where I found it. This video, Possessed Girl Found on Subway, differs slightly from other entries because there is no info on it. There are a few explanations, but we have no information on how long it has been around the internet, where it was filmed and by whom, or what happened to the people in it. It's a real mystery that I couldn't find the origin. This 1 minute and 20 seconds long first appeared on YouTube in 2007, posted by the now deleted channel Obey the Walrus. The video features an animated image of Andros from Star Fox, some psychedelic patterns, and footage of American drag queen Goddess Bunny. At the same time, a Spanish rendition of The Itsy Bitsy Spider plays in the background. And in the end, we are confronted with it. A PNG of a normal walrus. What even happened? That's a good question. Nobody knows, and the internet at the time wasn't ready for the walrus. Obey the Walrus became huge and went on some sort of power trip, creating a cult of personality around themselves, going rogue, and resulting in what can be called a YouTube Greek tragedy. The video itself became the subject of much speculation as it was erroneously attributed to a cult called La Morsa, the Walrus, which was just made up. So ultimately, Obey the Walrus was a huge mess. It's hard to talk about it because there's not that much to say about it. A bit of a nothing burger when you look under the surface. And there are also only so many ways to say that the creator was a horrible, horrible person with an inflated ego. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is a musical horror comedy web series created by Becky Sloan and Joe Pelling. The series is known for its blend of surrealism and dark humor with horror and musical elements. Its animation combines puppetry, live action, and stop motion with traditional forms. The original series consisted of 6 short episodes released on YouTube from the 29th of July 2011 to the 19th of June 2016. Due to its popularity, a television series was released in 2022. The television series discusses jobs, death, family, and more mature subjects. Each episode starts like a typical children's series. They feature anthropomorphic puppets like those in Sesame Street or The Muppets. The series parodies children's TV shows by contrasting its childlike environment against its disturbing themes. Each episode features a surreal plot twist in the climax. These plot twists include graphic violence, dark humor, existentialism, and psychological horror. The web series received widespread critical acclaim. The television series was met with similar acclaim. Give them both a watch, or at least the web series since it's free on YouTube. Mouse.avi. Mouse.avi is an instantly recognizable internet relic from the 2010s, though not for the reasons you might expect. The background sound of the video is actually the same one used for the Mr. Incredible Becoming Uncanny meme, the uncanny part at least, and that's actually a perfect representation of Mouse.avi. It's a creepypasta and a video that terrorized many of us as a kid, but it's mostly forgotten nowadays. But what was it about? The creepypasta is a nameless narrator talking about one Leonard Maltin, a collector who was watching old Disney cartoons. He was trying to make a digital copy of one of them to put on DVD and somehow uncovered new footage. Dark, twisted imagery of Mickey walking around aimlessly as hellish screaming and wailing filled the otherwise silent cartoon, and the quality of the film degraded. The 9 extra minutes of footage ended abruptly with a message in Russian that translates to, "The sights of hell bring its viewers back in." The movie was hidden at Disney HQ, and animators who saw it either ended their lives or tried to leak it to the rest of the world. And now someone finally did it. Maybe not quite. The video that accompanied the text was deleted, but there are a few recreations by talented people. Nowadays, stuff like that doesn't quite scare people. It actually gives them a sense of nostalgia as they look back on how much their taste in horror has evolved since then. But hey, Mickey Mouse is now in the public domain, so nothing stops you from making a depressed, evil version of him. Level 6. Memory Hole. The Memory Hole YouTube channel is a mess. A confusing mess of old VHS tapes cobbled together into bizarre little clip shows. Nowadays it's pretty tricky to tell, but back in the day, the channel used to be called the Film Archives. The channel had a completely different theme and purpose, apparently hosting historical documentaries and films, and, at least according to the people who remember it, the Film Archives was pretty well regarded in terms of content quality. Once again, in contrast to the weirdness of its current incarnation. Or maybe not. Rather confusingly, there might once have been another channel, or maybe not. There is at least one Reddit thread that links Memory Hole to the Film Archives, and the few people who commented on it seem to be sure these two have something to do with the other. However, doing a little more research also presents a completely different story. Apparently, the channel was created by the people behind Everything is Terrible, an artist collective from LA that finds, edits, and compiles clips from old VHS tapes. Vice managed to find and contact one of their editors, Commodore Gilgamesh. The Commodore gave them an interview in which he pretty much explained everything and dispelled any doubts you could have about the channel. The Memory Hole, much like Everything is Terrible, it's just a place where they store edited footage from old home videos the team had access to. According to Commodore Gilgamesh, they have the world's most extensive and well-organized library of home videos. The team got access to it due to their connections to a famous television show. Yes, some of the content is creepy and unsettling, but that's the point. These are restored clips of content that otherwise would not have made it to television. And that's it. No haunted tapes, just people having fun. But what about the Film Archives? No idea. Look at the Clown. Look at the Clown, a child therapy program, is a 220-second-long crime in video format. Uploaded by American visionary Ronald Yoder American Classics to his channel of the same name. Look at the Clown is both absurdist comedy and horror. It plays on the fear of clowns that many people have to create one of the most unsettling experiences I have ever seen on the platform. Ronald Yoder American Classics, inspired by renowned child psychologist, which is supposedly the famous actress Tilda Swinton, creates this video for his son, Ronald Yoder Jr., who is afraid of clowns and may be missing. After watching it, I don't know if it could make anyone less afraid of clowns. The video is 9 years old, and surprisingly, Ronald Yoder posts every couple of months. His channel is not dead, and after watching some of his videos, I can safely say that I don't get him or his motives. All of Yoder's videos are absurdist comedies that reveal little about him. He seems to be aware of Look at the Clown's popularity. He's even made fun of iceberg videos covering the video and his channel.
Thank you to YouTube's users, Chill Fuel, for mentioning me in his icebergs video.
He has also parodied his most infamous video in other more creative ways.
Thank you, Mr. Chillfuel, for further cementing my legacies as the creepy clown man of YouTubes.com.
Some people, Yoder included, seem to think that this video was one of the earliest forms of analog horror. While I can't verify any of these claims, I can guarantee that nobody should look at the clowns. Alan Tutorials. Created by Alan Resnick in 2011, Alan Tutorials is a channel that instructs its viewers on how to successfully perform nonsensical tasks, such as how to leak on a piece of paper, how to make mail into a square, and how to make a windmill. How to make a windmill is my favorite because by the end you don't actually make a windmill, but you hear Alan trying to explain how to make it work. As time passed, some strange videos were uploaded to the channel. Videos such as how to escape a dark room and find light, how to eat light spin salad, and a few more all began to show up on his channel, making some of his viewers think Alan might have been kidnapped and escaped using the skills he developed through his tutorials. Alan hasn't uploaded for a decade, and the last time we saw him, he was trying to escape from a room covered in trash.
And it's torn.
What happened to him? We do know. Alan Resnick is a comedian, visual artist, and filmmaker. He's a member of Wham City Art Collective and a founding member of Wham City Comedy. Alan is also the voice, arms, and legs behind Alan Tutorials. The whole channel is an art project that mixes absurdist comedy and horror, which actually caught some people off guard in the 2010s. It's excellent and worth a watch today. Save Them, Jesus. Save Them, Jesus is a 1 minute and 10-second long video that shows an image of Jesus. The image quality decays, giving it an evil, demonic look. His head begins to spin like you'd see in an Exorcist movie, all the while bizarre sounds play in the background. The video ends with a message that says, "Do you love helping others? Do you love praying for others? Well, why not those who are suffering in hell? They need it the most. Do they really deserve such unimaginable eternal pain? But if you want to end their suffering, you'll have to oppose God. He won't erase hell, no matter how much we ask." While the image is unsettling and satanic, the text has a more skeptical tone, as if the creator is trying to cast doubt if people are as good as they think, and if God is as merciful as he seems. Save Them Jesus was originally uploaded by Imagindom, a YouTube channel created in 2016 and deleted shortly after. Imagindom's videos all have this unsettling tone to them, and their channel, as related by them, was the victim of a mass flagging done by children, it seems. To some extent, Imagindom's videos are indeed disturbing, and the message of skepticism is dense, but ultimately, this was something of an art project. Imagindom wanted to make people question things through his unsettling imagery, which is a valid form of artistic expression. While the channel has long since been deleted, you can find all of its videos on the Internet Archive. So if you're up for a bit of shock philosophy, you might want to check Imagindom's videos. Level 7. Cooking with Huck Botko. Cooking with Huck Botko is difficult to talk about. It's actually hard to say if the footage is fictional or not, as the delivery is extremely deadpan, and you see a good amount of the disgusting stuff actually happening on camera. Huck Botko's videos are a part of the Ensuring Your Place in Hell DVD film collection made probably in 2010 by an anonymous person. The DVD contains 4 minimal films combined, including the infamous Grave Robbing for Morons, the obscure Mortuary of the Dead, Cooking with Huck Botko, and the bizarre Exploding Varmints. Ensuring Your Place in Hell is an exceedingly rare DVD that will go for outrageous prices online if you can find it at all. On the other hand, it's a goldmine for people who enjoy morbid, horror-adjacent entertainment. There are 5 videos in total, though only 4 of them are related to cooking. Since we'll focus on the cooking ones, I'll briefly summarize the unrelated one. Huck tries to pass an STI to a girl he dislikes through a harebrained scheme. He fails and does awful things to her personal belongings. In the first film, he bakes a cake for his dad, paying people to spit on the batter. In the second one, he makes a cheesecake for his mother using roadkill. In the third one, he makes a fruitcake for his sister using contaminated human blood and gives it to her during a party where many other people eat it too. And in the fourth and final film, he makes a green pie for his brother using semen. His whole family ate it this time. Going back to Huck Botko for a moment, he is a legitimate film director and screenwriter. We don't have that much info on him. Everything he and his friends do in the videos is realistically nasty. Things that could inspire terrible people looking to get back at someone else. He also has an X account, though Huck hasn't posted for over a decade and a half. There isn't anything particularly entertaining about him there, so we are left in the dark. Ignorance is a blessing, after all. Protect and Survive. Protect and Survive was a public information campaign produced by the British government between 1974 and 1980. It advised the public on how to protect themselves during a nuclear attack and consisted of pamphlets, newspaper advertisements, radio broadcasts, and public information films. Protect and Survive had originally been intended for distribution only in the event of a national emergency. Protect and Survive was adapted for television as a series of 20 short public information films. The films were classified and intended for transmission on all television channels if the government determined that a nuclear attack was likely within 72 hours. Richard Taylor Cartoons produced the films, which were ready for use by at least 1975. The episodes are similar in content to other material produced by the campaign. It's unclear how, but people did manage to get our hands on some of the material. Pamphlets and the 48-minute film have all been unearthed and have since become culturally significant in the UK. Produced during the height of the Cold War, the videos have a certain sterile and eerie tone. Unsettling the viewer is definitely intentional as a way to capture the viewer's attention. While nowadays they are compared to analog horror, these are legitimate guides. They'll teach you how to deal with anything from how nuclear fallout works to disposing of bodies. Watching the videos has a sobering effect. It reminds us how easily the world we take for granted could be taken from us. It's grim. Paris Catacombs footage. This 1-minute video has been around the internet since the early 90s. Perhaps one of the oldest internet mysteries, the video shows a person walking around the catacomb tunnels. As he explores the place, you get a sense that they are growing increasingly uneasy before they start running and drop their camera. The last thing we see is the person, apparently a man, running away. The camera was apparently found by another explorer in one of the deepest parts of the catacombs, still functional. The person who found it, however, is unknown. While the video has fascinated many internet and real-life detectives, there is nothing to prove its authenticity. There's no evidence to suggest that someone got lost down there and recorded their final moments before disappearing. What precious little we have indicates it's just some sort of art project. The only verifiable thing is that, due to the lack of graffiti, the person has to be pretty deep inside the catacombs. Otherwise, anybody could have filmed themselves exploring, running away, and cutting the part where they come back for the camera. The catacombs beneath Paris are a grim place, to say the least. The bones of 6 million dead people line its walls and litter the ground. Death is everywhere, from alcoves with entire skeletons to bones turned into macabre decorations. The tunnels that would one day make up the vast underground network of tunnels beneath Paris have been around since the 6th century. The catacombs would take the function we know them for today around the 16th century when Paris cemeteries overflowed with human remains. The catacombs have been a source of myths and urban legends ever since. To some extent, this footage is just a modern version of old stories.
If English isn't your first language like me, and you want your writing to reflect your voice, sign up for a free Grammarly account.
50 disturbing cases, 7 levels. I spent hours gathering only the most disturbing incidents from each state. Right from the first case, things get brutal, but as we go deeper, the stories get so horrifying, you won't believe they were real. Let's begin at the tip of this iceberg. Level 1. New Jersey, Seaside Boardwalk Fire. After Hurricane Sandy in 2012, Seaside Park residents thought they had seen the worst. However, barely a year later, they were proven wrong. On September 2, 2013, a massive fire broke out on the Seaside Park Boardwalk. It began beneath an ice cream and custard shop. In no time, heavy winds and tar roofing fueled the fire, and it quickly spread into the neighboring Seaside Heights. Over 400 firefighters from multiple counties arrived to battle the flames, but the situation was worse than they had expected. Many water pipes had already been damaged during Sandy, forcing firefighters to draw water from a nearby bay. But winds of 30 to 40 miles per hour made their jobs even harder and triggered explosions in the buildings. When the New Jersey governor arrived 4 hours later, the boardwalk he had reopened just 3 months earlier was still engulfed in flames. For business owners who had spent months rebuilding after Sandy, it was a nightmare repeating itself. Their livelihoods and the town's economy depended on the boardwalk, now reduced to ash and rubble. By 7:45 p.m., the fire was finally under control. No lives were lost, but over 50 businesses in Seaside Park, including the Funtown Amusement Park, were destroyed. Still, the towns were determined to rebuild. They spent $4.7 million on recovery work, and the boardwalk was open again for the 2014 summer season. New Hampshire, Abby Hernandez. On October 9, 2013, Abby Hernandez left school and began the short walk home in North Conway, New Hampshire. But she never made it. That afternoon, her new boots were rubbing painfully against her heels. When a man stopped and offered her a ride, she accepted, hoping for relief. Moments later, he pulled out a gun, smashed Abby's phone, and used a stun gun to overpower her. Afterwards, he drove her to a secluded property in the woods. Inside a locked, soundproof storage container, he blindfolded Abby and chained her in place. To control her, he fitted her with a shock collar while a camera monitored her movements. The man warned her that if she tried to escape, he would kill her family. When Abby did not return home, her mother, Xenia Hernandez, realized something was wrong and reported her daughter missing. Police began searching immediately. On the other hand, Abby focused on survival. She understood that resistance would only bring more violence. If she wanted to live, she had to gain his trust. She cooperated, stayed calm, and studied his behavior. 2 weeks into the captivity, the man ordered her to write a letter to her mother. Abby tried to slip in hidden clues, but he noticed and punished her before forcing Abby to write another letter under his watch. When the letter reached Xenia, it spoke about missing home, staying strong, and being sorry, but gave no hint of her location. Though it was Abby's handwriting, Xenia sensed fear behind the words. She handed it to investigators, but detectives hesitated to release it publicly, worried that if the captor felt exposed, he might retaliate. After holding it for a month, authorities shared the letter with the public, but it backfired. Many people believed the letter proved Abby had run away. Some even demanded that her family repay the cost of the search. Despite the criticism, Xenia continued pleading for her daughter's safe return. Inside the container, Abby slowly earned small privileges. Her captor allowed her to read books. In one of them, she found his name written inside the cover, Nathaniel Kibbe. The discovery gave her something powerful: identity. She began addressing him as Nate, building a fragile sense of familiarity. Months passed, and Abby remained patient. She reminded Nate that if he ever let her go, she would not reveal who he was. Over time, his guard lowered.
Part of how I gained his trust, I guess, was, I went along with whatever he wanted to do.
Eventually, Nate began producing counterfeit money inside the shed. By then, he trusted Abby enough to involve her. She complied carefully, knowing any mistake could cost her life. But after a worker that Nate paid with counterfeit money attempted to use the bills at a Walmart, local police learned about the illegal operation. The woman warned Nate that the police were going to search his property soon. As pressure mounted, the man made a decision. On July 20th, 2014, after 9 months in captivity, he drove Abby to an abandoned road in North Conway and released her. Security cameras captured her walking up to her home in the same outfit she was abducted in. She looked thinner and exhausted, but finally free. A week later, Nathaniel Kibbe was arrested and charged with more than 200 crimes. He initially pleaded not guilty. Later, he accepted a plea deal on multiple felony charges and was sentenced to 45 to 90 years in prison. North Carolina power grid attack. In December 2022, over 40,000 people in Moore County, North Carolina suddenly lost power. But it was not a system failure. It was deliberate. Weeks before the blackout, the FBI had issued a bulletin to private industry warning of increased threats to electric infrastructure. The alert did not name a specific location, but it highlighted a growing risk. Around 7 p.m. on December 3rd, that warning became reality. A Duke Energy substation was struck by gunfire and severely damaged. Before authorities could fully assess the situation, a second substation in West End was also attacked. The combined damage cut electricity to most of the county. The impact was immediate. Schools closed, businesses shut down, and officials imposed a county-wide curfew. Investigators recovered roughly 24 shell casings from a high-powered rifle. Soon, authorities announced a $75,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction. Meanwhile, utility crews worked around the clock to restore power, but the repairs were complex and slow. The county's regional hospital operated on generator power, and water and sewer systems relied on backup generators to remain functional. As temperatures dropped at night, thousands of residents were left without heat. 3 days after the attack, about 35,000 people were still in the dark. It was not until the evening of December 7th that outages dropped to around 1,200 households. 5 days after the shooting, officials permanently lifted the curfew. For most residents, power eventually returned. For 87-year-old Karen Zollner, it never truly did. She relied on an oxygen machine due to chronic lung disease and was found dead in her home after the power outage rendered her equipment inoperable. Nearly a year after the attack, authorities released an image of a vehicle of interest seen near the substations that night. No suspects have been publicly identified, and the Moore County power grid attack remains unsolved. Arizona, Bob Crane. To millions of viewers, Bob Crane was a charming sitcom star. But behind the scenes, he developed habits that would follow him off stage and into something far darker. Bob Crane played the lead role in the 1965 television sitcom Hogan's Heroes, but after it ended, his career began to decline. With fewer opportunities in Hollywood, Bob turned to dinner theater, a form of entertainment that combined a restaurant meal with a live stage play. It kept him working, but it was far from the spotlight he once had. In 1978, while touring with a dinner theater production in Arizona, Bob failed to show up for a scheduled lunch meeting. Concerned, his co-star went to his apartment to check on him, and she found him lying in his bed, beaten to death. His injuries were so severe that the theater manager couldn't even identify him immediately. But what made the situation so bizarre was that police found no signs of forced entry. That suggested the killer was someone Bob knew or had access to the apartment. As officers processed the scene, a call came in from Bob's friend John Carpenter. John was a video equipment salesman who had met Bob during the run of Hogan's Heroes. The two men became close friends, but their friendship went beyond casual companionship. Bob attracted women easily and often introduced Carpenter as his manager. Over time, the two began videotaping their intimate encounters with women they met. What started as experimentation turned into an obsession. Even after Carpenter became a national sales manager, he arranged his business trips around Crane's dinner theater schedule so they could meet up. During his call to police, Carpenter didn't seem fazed that officers were in his friend's apartment. He said he had been with Bob the night before the murder. That made him the last person known to have seen Bob alive. Since investigators already believed the killer was someone Bob knew, Carpenter quickly became their primary suspect. But there was more. Bob was just 2 weeks away from turning 50. According to his son, he had grown tired of the lifestyle and wanted to end his friendship with Carpenter for a fresh start. Witnesses later reported seeing the two men arguing at a bar the night before Bob was killed. It was the last confirmed sighting of him alive. At the crime scene, detectives found blood everywhere. On the front door, the back exit door, the doorknob, curtains, and pillows. Most importantly, they found blood inside the rental car Carpenter had been using as well. Although in 1978, DNA testing was not available, investigators could test blood type. The blood came back as type B, the same as Bob Crane's. Carpenter did not have type B blood, and neither did anyone else who had used the vehicle. Detectives believed they had enough evidence, but the county attorney disagreed. Without a weapon, the case was considered too weak to prosecute, so no arrest was made. For years, the case went cold. 12 years later, detectives reopened the case. Investigators had discovered a photograph of the rental car's interior that appeared to show a piece of brain tissue. Although the physical sample had been lost, a judge ruled that the photographic evidence was admissible. In 1992, John Carpenter was arrested and charged with Bob Crane's murder. At trial, Bob Crane's previous escapades gave the defense plenty to play with. There was still no weapon. They argued that Crane could have been killed by a jealous husband or boyfriend or one of the women he had videotaped. Ultimately, the jury found John Carpenter not guilty. And to this day, the case remains officially unsolved.
At the University of Arizona Global Campus, we are proud to offer over 50 career-focused online programs to a fierce community of Wildcats from around the globe. Proud to be UAGC. Learn more at uagc.edu.
Wyoming. Amy Roe Bechtel. Amy Roe Bechtel was a 24-year-old record-breaking distance runner with dreams of qualifying for the 2000 Summer Olympics. But the very passion that defined her would become the last thing she ever did. On July 24th, 1997, Amy went about her usual day. She ran errands, taught a fitness class, and even visited a local photography business to ask about an upcoming competition. Everything seemed normal until she decided to go for a run along a loop road. Amy was preparing for a 10-kilometer race she was organizing in September on that very loop and wanted to practice the route ahead of time. But that was the last time she would be on that route. Meanwhile, her husband, Steve Bechtel, went rock climbing with friends. When he returned around 4:30 p.m., Amy still wasn't home. At the time, he didn't think much of it. It wasn't until 10 p.m. when her parents confirmed they hadn't heard from her that he reported her missing. For those of you who are like, why didn't he just call her? This was 1997. Cell phones were not that common. Authorities, along with friends and volunteers, launched a search. Hours later, they found Amy's vehicle along the loop road. It was unlocked, her car keys left on the driver's seat, and a to-do list, but it provided no clues about her whereabouts. Searches of nearby lakes, mines, and trails turned up nothing. Tips and potential leads also led to nowhere. At first, officers considered that Amy might have been attacked by a bear or mountain lion, but suspicions shifted after investigators reviewed a series of journals owned by the husband, Steve. The journals contained writings that described violence toward women, and he even referenced his wife. On August 1st, 1997, officers attempted to interview Steve under the pretense that they had evidence he was involved in Amy's disappearance. Once he realized this, he terminated the interview. Although Steve later stated that the journals were simply song lyrics for his band, he refused to take a polygraph test and would not grant further interviews. In 2004, Amy was declared legally dead by her husband. And to this day, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance remain a mystery. Minnesota, Jeremy Jourdain. On Halloween night 2016, just before 9 p.m., Jeremy Jourdain left his grandfather's home to attend a party with friends. He had lived there all his life, but after that night, everything would change. A friend drove him to the party in Bemidji, Minnesota, about 20 minutes away. Jeremy's older sister, Jameen, who lived in Bemidji, met him there. The party began as expected, but when Jeremy stepped outside with a few friends to smoke, he suddenly ran off without explanation. His friends assumed he was heading home, but they were wrong. The party was more than 16 miles from his home, making the journey almost impossible on foot. By 9 a.m. the next morning, when Jeremy had not returned, his grandfather reported him missing. Police launched an immediate search, combing the area on foot, and that marked the beginning of a decade-long investigation. As efforts intensified, authorities searched by vehicle, air, dogs, and even water patrols. They searched private properties and the surrounding terrain, but no matter what they did, it proved unsuccessful. No cameras caught his steps, no one saw where he went. It was as if Jeremy simply vanished into the night. He would be 27 years old today. He's never been found, and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance remain a mystery. Maine, Ayla Reynolds. The 2011 Christmas season was devastating for Waterville, Maine, and the family of Ayla Reynolds. On the morning of December 17th, her father, Justin DiPietro, discovered that his daughter was missing. 2 months earlier, Justin had been granted temporary custody after Ayla's mother, Trista Reynolds, entered rehab for substance addiction. Trista allowed Ayla to stay with Justin, believing she would be safe, but she wasn't. According to Justin, he last saw Ayla when he put her to bed around 8 p.m. 2 other adults were in the home that night, his sister Alicia DiPietro and his girlfriend Courtney Roberts. All 3 claimed someone must have entered the house and taken Ayla. But almost immediately, investigators began questioning that story. There were no signs of forced entry. Ayla was wearing a soft cast on her arm at that time, making it unlikely she could have just wandered off. For weeks, Justin avoided public interviews, which made Trista openly accuse him of knowing more than he was saying. Then, in 2012, investigators found something alarming. They had discovered more than a cup full of Ayla's blood inside the home's basement. Far more than what would be expected from some minor injury. Yet despite this discovery, no one was arrested and years passed without answers. On May 17, 2017, the state of Maine officially declared Ayla Reynolds legally dead. And that same year, Maine State Police publicly stated that they believe Ayla was killed inside the home the night she disappeared, and that her body was removed and concealed. More than a decade later, Ayla Reynolds remains missing. No body has ever been found, and what happened inside that house that December night remains one of Maine's most haunting mysteries. Level 2. Utah. Lori Hacking. Lori Hacking was a stockbroker's assistant in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was 5 weeks pregnant and preparing to move with her husband, Mark Hacking, for his medical school plans. Everything seemed set for a new chapter, until one morning, she vanished. On July 19, 2004, Mark called the police to report that Lori had not returned from her early morning jog. 40 minutes later, he called again, claiming he had found her car parked near a canyon trail where she often ran. Police launched an immediate search. To the public, the couple appeared to have a stable marriage, but investigators soon noticed troubling inconsistencies. Although Mark told officers he had been looking for Lori, officers found Lori's purse, wallet, and the keys to the car she supposedly drove to the canyon. They even discovered a hunting knife with blood on it. Her car seat had been adjusted for someone taller than Lori, and blood was found in the back seat. As investigators tried to piece together the evidence, another strange incident occurred. The morning after Lori disappeared, witnesses reported that Mark was running outside a hotel wearing nothing but sandals. He was taken to a psychiatric facility. However, one expert later noted that someone in a true psychotic break would not likely have remembered to keep their shoes on. Still, suspicion alone was not enough. Then detectives uncovered something more alarming. Investigators learned that Lori had called the medical school days before her disappearance to ask about financial aid during her pregnancy, only to find out that Mark had never enrolled. For years, he had pretended to attend classes, take exams, and even travel for medical school interviews. Both families had believed the story. That discovery changed everything. While Mark remained in the psychiatric facility, two of his brothers confronted him and urged him to tell the truth. Faced with mounting evidence, he finally confessed. Mark admitted that when Lori had confronted him about the deception, the argument escalated, so he shot her while she slept and placed her body in a dumpster. 2 months later, police found Lori's remains in a municipal landfill. Mark Hacking was charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 6 years. The Utah Board of Pardons later ruled that he would not be considered for parole until at least 2035. Iowa. Molly Tibbetts. In a quiet farming community of 1,500 in Brooklyn, Iowa, what could possibly go wrong? On July 17, 2018, Molly Tibbetts had left her boyfriend's house for her regular evening jog, even sending him a Snapchat message before heading out. But when she didn't show up for work the next day and was unreachable by family or boyfriend, they reported her missing. Authorities immediately began searching.
Grainger offers professional-grade products, easy ordering, and next-day delivery, making them the go-to play for everyone keeping arenas game day ready. Call, click, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
They combed the town, scanning every corner by land, air, and water, but the 20-year-old was nowhere to be found. Investigation. They conducted searches and recovered an item of interest under a driveway, followed by another item from the Hauk family farm. They never named these items, but officers said they believe they're in possession of the firearm used to kill Tommy Ballard. After 8 long years, the charges and arrest finally began. In 2023, the employee, Steve Lawson, and his 32-year-old son, Joseph Lawson, were taken into custody. Prosecutors argued that Brooks Hauk and Crystal Rogers' relationship had been deteriorating. They presented evidence that Hauk killed Crystal on the family farm, possibly motivated by fear of losing custody of their son. The Lawsons were accused of helping to conceal the crime, including removing Crystal's car to make it appear as though she had left voluntarily. However, the flat tire led to the car being abandoned, which contributed to the discovery and investigation. In the end, Steve Lawson was sentenced to 17 years in between Lewis's group and another group outside a nightclub. When it was over, 2 young men, Jacinth Baker and Richard Lawler, had been stabbed to death. When police arrived, Lewis and his 2 friends, Reginald Oakley and Joseph Sweeting, had already left the scene in a limousine. During questioning, Lewis straight up denied being present at the fight. However, detectives recovered a knife from the scene that had been purchased at a sporting goods store where Lewis had recently appeared for an autograph signing. Blood from one of the victims was also found inside the limousine. 11 days later, all 3 men were indicted on and aggravated assault charges. But the trial quickly became complicated. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts. Even the limousine driver, who originally told police he saw Lewis strike one of the victims and heard his companion say, "I stabbed mine," softened his testimony in court. He later said he only saw Lewis pull his arm back, but never actually saw him throw a punch. One major issue for prosecutors was the missing evidence. The white suit Lewis wore that night, reportedly stained with blood, was never recovered. Without it, their case weakened significantly. 2 months into the trial, the case took a shocking turn. Lewis accepted a plea deal and testified against Oakley and Sweeting. He pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice, stating that his friends had purchased the knives earlier that week. During the 4-week trial, Oakley and Sweeting argued they acted in self-defense, and after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury acquitted them of all charges. Lewis was sentenced to 12 months of probation, and the NFL later fined him $250,000. 1 year later, Lewis led the Baltimore Ravens to victory in Super Bowl 35 and was named Super Bowl MVP. To many, the events of that night in Atlanta remain a shadow that never fully disappeared. Hawaii, the Xerox technician. In 1999, Xerox management replaced a technician's old photocopier with a newer model, but the employee resisted learning to repair it, and when he came in for training the next day, the man was armed with a gun. Brian Uyasugi had been working at Xerox Corporation as a service technician in 1984, but over the years he often clashed with coworkers, accusing them of harassing him and tampering with the machines he serviced. Things got so bad that he even made death threats to his supervisor. Despite this behavior, Uyasugi remained employed. However, when management required him to undertake the training, he finally snapped. At 8 a.m. on November 2nd, 1999, Uyasugi entered the building and opened fire. Only 11 people were inside at the time. He fired 28 shots, 25 of which struck one person. 6 others were killed. One intended victim managed to escape, and Uyasugi deliberately spared another one. As officers responded, Uyasugi fled the building in a company van, triggering a manhunt. 2 hours later, a jogger spotted the van and quickly notified police. To prevent any further casualties in case of a shootout, officers blocked off a wide area around the van and held a standoff. 5 hours later, Uyasugi surrendered. During the trial, Uyasugi claimed he had refused the training because he believed management would fire him. When they didn't, he decided to give them a reason to do so. Brian Uyasugi was convicted of 7 counts and 1 count of attempted. The man was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without parole. Illinois, Highland Park Parade. While families gathered to celebrate America's Independence Day, one man in the crowd had entirely different plans. On July 4th, 2022, during a parade in Highland Park, Illinois, 21-year-old Robert Cremo III climbed onto a rooftop overlooking the parade route using an unsecured ladder. 14 minutes after the parade began, he opened fire on spectators and participants below. In just a few minutes, Cremo fired 83 rounds into the crowd. 7 people were killed and 48 others were injured. As police rushed toward the area, Cremo fled. He dressed in women's clothing to help disguise himself and blended into the panicked crowd. However, the rifle he used fell from his bag during the escape and was recovered by authorities within minutes. After leaving Highland Park, Cremo drove to Madison, Wisconsin, where another Independence Day celebration was underway. There, he considered carrying out a second attack, but ultimately decided against it. Still on the run, he discarded his cell phone to avoid being tracked, but his escape didn't last long. After police released a photo of Cremo and a description of his silver Honda Fit, a driver spotted his damaged vehicle and alerted police. For 13 minutes, the driver followed Cremo while relaying his location to 911 operators. 8 hours after the shooting, Robert Cremo III was arrested without incident. During the investigation, authorities revealed that law enforcement had prior encounters with him. In September 2019, police were called after he allegedly threatened to kill a family member. As a result, officers seized multiple weapons at the time, including knives and a sword. However, no charges were filed. That same year, despite those prior incidents, Cremo applied for a firearm owner's identification, FOID card. Since he was under 21, his father sponsored the application, legally allowing him to obtain the card. With that FOID card, Cremo later purchased several firearms legally, including the rifle used in the attack. Investigators determined there was no clear personal motive behind the attack, aside from Cremo's long-standing obsession with mass shootings and violence. On April 24, 2025, Robert Cremo III was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional 2,400 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Maryland, the Lululemon. On March 12, 2011, a Lululemon store manager in Bethesda, Maryland, arrived to find the door unlocked and merchandise strewn across the floor. At first glance, it looked like a robbery, until she heard moaning from the back of the store. Terrified, she asked a man outside to help her check, and what he found was horrific. One worker, Jana Murray, lying dead face down, and another, Brittany Norwood, was semi-conscious with zip ties binding her wrists and ankles and her face covered in blood. When police arrived, Brittany, clearly shaken, told them what happened the night before. She claimed she had forgotten her wallet after closing and called Jana, who returned to unlock the store. As they entered, 2 men dressed in black with ski masks allegedly forced their way inside. According to Brittany, the men attacked them and assaulted them. Sadly, Jana did not survive. Police initially treated her as a victim, but as investigators examined the scene, the story began to unravel. Jana had been attacked with extreme violence. She suffered at least 331 wounds inflicted by multiple weapons. Brittany's injuries, in contrast, were minor and appeared self-inflicted. The difference was too serious to ignore. Bloody footprints inside the store matched a pair of men's size 14 sneakers, but they also matched Brittany's own shoes. Strangely, the tracks stopped before either exit. Although there was a hole in Jana's underwear suggesting assault, forensic testing found no evidence that either woman had been assaulted. Still, investigators needed more than suspicions. Soon, other evidence, like neighbors' testimony on seeing them argue, also stacked up against Brittany. Moreover, when police searched Jana's car, they found both Jana's and Brittany's blood inside. Brittany claimed the attackers had ordered her to move the car to a nearby farmer's market parking lot and return within 10 minutes, threatening to kill her if she refused.
They made me move her car.
Okay.
I know where her car is. And they seemed to know where it was, where she was parked.
Okay.
They asked, they said, where are her keys? I have no idea. One of them punched me in my head and made me look through her coat and her bag for them. When I finally found them, they said if I was to pass to anyone and open my mouth, I can consider myself dead.
By this point, the inconsistencies were too significant to ignore. 1 week after the killing, police arrested Brittany Norwood. Under questioning, she finally confessed. Turns out, Jana had discovered a pair of unpaid leggings in Brittany's bag and had contacted a manager. So before things escalate, Brittany took matters in her own hands. Later that night, she called Jana and claimed she had forgotten something at the store. When Jana returned, Brittany attacked her. After killing her, Brittany moved Jana's car and staged the scene to look like a robbery. She then cut herself and bound her own wrists and ankles with zip ties to support her theory. In the end, Brittany Norwood was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Arkansas, Devil's Den Park. In July 2025, Clinton and Kristen Brink set out on a hike with their 2 daughters at Devil's Den State Park in northwest Arkansas. But only some of them made it back home. While walking along the trail, a man suddenly attacked Clinton. Panicked, Kristen rushed their daughters to safety and immediately came back to help her husband. But Mommy and Daddy never came back. The girls were eventually found by another hiker, but by that time, it was too late. Both Clinton and Kristen were dead. When investigators arrived, they found a trail of blood leading toward the scene. However, the suspect had not escaped unnoticed. Witnesses reported seeing a man leaving the area with blood on his face. He had gotten into a black sedan with tape partially covering the license plate. To find him, police began reviewing surveillance footage from the nearby roads and businesses. The vehicle was eventually identified along with its driver. Quickly, a sketch of the suspect was released to the public. 4 days after the killings, officers tracked the vehicle to Springdale, Arkansas, where the suspect was arrested at a salon. He was identified as Andrew McGann, a 28-year-old teacher who had worked in multiple school districts across 3 states. Authorities ultimately found a match between McGann's DNA and the evidence recovered at the crime scene. In the end, Andrew McGann was charged with 2 counts of capital murder and is currently awaiting trial. Idaho, student murders.
911 location of your emergency.
Hi, something is happening. Something happened in our house. We don't know what.
What is the address of the emergency?
1122.
What is the rest of the address?
Oh, Kings Road.
That was the frantic 911 call made just before noon on November 13th, 2022. No one in Moscow, Idaho could understand what had happened inside that 3-story house. 3 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, and Zayna Kernodal, lived with 2 other roommates in a 3-story house off campus. That Saturday, Zana's boyfriend Ethan was visiting, and the 2 of them had gone to a fraternity party. Haley and Madison had spent the evening at a downtown sports bar and were out until around midnight. By about 2 a.m., all 5 roommates and Ethan were back in the house. But when the sun rose the next morning, Kaylee, Madison, Zaina, and Ethan were all found dead inside. When police arrived, one of the surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen, said she was awakened by a noise on the 3rd floor, but she looked out her door. There was nothing. However, the moment she closed the door, she heard Zaina crying, followed by a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Startled, she opened her door again, and a figure dressed in black walked past her and exited through the sliding door in the kitchen. Since Dylan had been intoxicated, she locked herself in a state of disbelief, thinking what she saw wasn't real. It wasn't until about 4:26 a.m. that Dylan came downstairs and saw Zaina lying on the floor. Panicked, she ran into a bedroom to join the other surviving roommate, Bethany Funk. The two of them locked themselves and contacted their friends, who then called 911. All 4 victims had been stabbed multiple times. Authorities were under intense pressure to find the perpetrator, but they had very little to work on. There were no signs of forced entry, and no obvious weapon was left at the scene. After reviewing hours of CCTV footage, investigators finally found something incriminating. A white Hyundai Elantra driving past the victim's home 3 times until about 4:20 a.m., when it sped away from the neighborhood. At the crime scene, investigators also found a knife sheath containing a single source of male DNA. That vehicle and the DNA evidence eventually led police to Brian Kohberger, a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University. On December 30th, 2020, police finally arrested Kohberger after surveilling him for a while. At his home, investigators found a knife, a pistol, and a black face mask. When the DNA test results came back, they matched Kohberger to evidence from the crime scene. He was ultimately charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 felony count of burglary. On July 23, 2025, Brian Kohberger was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without parole eligibility, plus 10 years for the burglary conviction. Level 5. Louisiana Truck Attack. While the city of New Orleans prepared to host the 2025 Sugar Bowl, one man was planning something very different. Shamsuddin Bahar Jabbar was a former military serviceman who had served for 13 years. Although raised a Christian, he later converted to Islam. In the years before the attack, his views grew increasingly extreme. Between 1:29 a.m. and 3:20 a.m. on New Year's Eve, he posted videos on Facebook pledging allegiance to ISIS. In the recordings, he claimed his actions would highlight what he described as a war between believers and unbelievers. But what followed only brought tragedy, not ideology. That night, the fixed steel barriers designed to block vehicle access to the street were not raised. After exiting traffic, Jabbar drove a truck onto the sidewalk, bypassing a police SUV and temporary barricades meant to secure the area. Suddenly, he accelerated into pedestrians along a 3-block stretch before crashing into an aerial lift. Wearing body armor, Jabbar stepped out of the truck and opened fire on officers and bystanders. Police returned fire. The exchange ended when officers shot him multiple times in the torso, killing him at the scene. By the end of the attack, 14 people had been killed. 57 others were injured, including 2 police officers and 3 civilians wounded in the gunfire. But the danger didn't end there. After Jabbar was shot dead by police, investigators discovered several devices in the truck that appeared to be pipe bombs or improvised explosives, showing that his attack could have been even deadlier. Although he had pledged allegiance to ISIS online, investigators later stated they found no evidence that he had received direct instructions from the group. Authorities believe he acted alone, and the investigation remains ongoing. Alabama, Birmingham church incident. On the morning of Sunday, September 15, 1963, an anonymous man called the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham saying, 3 minutes. Before she could fully understand what he meant, a bomb exploded near the church's basement. 5 girls were in the basement at the time, changing into choir robes ahead of service. The blast tore through the building, shattering stained glass windows and collapsing part of the structure. Cars parked nearby were destroyed, and windows more than 2 blocks away were blown out. By the time authorities arrived, 4 girls were dead, and at least 22 others were injured. At first, investigators believed the explosion may have been caused by a bomb thrown from a passing car, but 5 days later, the FBI recovered a section of wire and fragments of red plastic. The evidence confirmed that a device had been planted near the church's women's lounge. Within days, investigators focused on a Ku Klux Klan splinter group known as the Cahaba Boys. Witnesses reported seeing a white man leave a car and walk toward the church shortly before the explosion. The church was targeted because it was a center of civil rights activity in Birmingham. 4 men were eventually identified as suspects. However, it took 14 years before the first conviction. In 1977, Robert Chambliss was prosecuted and convicted of first-degree murder. He died in prison. Decades later, in 2001 and 2002, Thomas Blanton Jr. and Bobby Cherry were each sentenced to life in